Welcome to Be Well. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Jonathan from Your Why, and I'm truly honored to bring you these conversations with leaders in their field related to living mindfully. As your moderator, I come to you with 30 plus years experience in mindfulness, wellness, and mental health. And I'll offer a quote by Thich Nhat Hanh. To be mindful is to be truly alive, present, and at one with those around you and with what you are doing. I believe the application of that particular quote will become very relevant to our topic today. During our conversation, I encourage you to use the chat function so you can offer questions and comments. And if you prefer, go to gallery view, probably offers the best experience of watching and being a part of this. Our topic today is leadership in times of stress and change. Today's guest is Dr. Mark Taggart. Mark, welcome.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you. I want to give you a sense of Dr. Mark Taggart's background. I'm currently CEO of San Diego-based changewell.com, an organization which is dedicated to improving the presence of leaders, both in person and on camera. Mark has been one of the early pioneers in linking leadership with health and productivity. As an entrepreneur, has built successful businesses and managed high-performing teams. As a consultant and change agent, has worked with large organizations to nonprofits. Mark is an internationally known speaker, a veteran of more than 1,000 presentations. As an educator, created dozens of training programs, authored and co-authored 10 different books. Dr. Taggart received his undergraduate medical training at Duke University. We're very fortunate to have Mark with us today. I will start us off with a simple quote, and I'll let you kind of weigh in on that. It's a quote by Matt Tenney, the author of The Mindfulness Edge. And it simply states, a simple mantra for inspiring, effective, mindful leadership. Cultivate peace of mind and go about doing good. I think of peace of mind in these times. Mark, I'll let you start with that.
Well, since you're quoting a mantra, I thought I then would share the mantra that I've used, probably at 500 presentations, and I've taught to lots of folks. And I learned this when I first had to give my first big talk to a group of business executives, all of whom were much older and knew much more, and I was so nervous. And I used a mantra which were 4 simple sentences, and I've been saying these over to myself for years now, for 25, 30 years. I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad you're here. I know what I know, and I care about you. So if you look at, and if you take your quote on mindfulness and you move that into an interpersonal dimension, you have to be glad you're here, project that happiness. Glad to be in the presence of another person. You know what you know, and then you act in such a way to care for them. And if you kind of keep those 4 phrases in your mind, certainly when you get up and give a presentation, you will not suffer from any real excess anxiety. But it's a good little mantra for leadership as well.
I love that, especially because it brings you to the moment. You're with a person, you're engaging in the person, and you're really celebrating that opportunity.
Yeah.
So, stress, these particular times, talk to us. How do we deal with stress? What do you see going on with all of us?
Yeah, so for many years, I've been teaching on another model on stress and change. And it has to do with what all of us need to do, what some of us need to do, and then what the individual needs to do. So if we look at what is it that keeps an individual hardy and mentally tough, there are 4 C's: control, challenge, commitment, and connectedness. So in these crazy times, what is it that you can do to build greater control? Now, for many years, I'm a physician, I'm a family practitioner by training. And, I would teach patients to exercise, tell them to exercise, work with them on exercise. Now, yes, it's good for your heart and your blood vessels and your blood pressure. But what it is really good for, it is voluntary simplicity. It is control. It is the simple act of just putting one foot in front of the other. So you look at what you can do. And right now I've been shuttered for almost 3 months here. And I work in my garden and I pull weeds. Why? It's something I can control. So control. Then the next one is challenge. And this is a harder one because this is is there a way to come away from this and look at this as a challenge and coming out with a greater skill set or more resilience because you've made it through this period of time. Commitment is interesting. I mean, I've committed I set out a list of things I could do, and I committed to just doing one thing, which was growing a garden this year. And so if you just do that one thing and you commit to it and you do it, then you reinforce a lot of good positive energy. And the last one is connectedness. And this is so hard. And obviously, what's the point of this Zoom meeting that we're doing? It's all about connectedness. So those are the generic things that everyone can do more of to stay well in these changing and challenging times.
Well, a couple of points that, I mean, I like everything that you're saying. Control, I know for me, I ascribe to, I need to like capture that early part of the day where I have control over my time, my schedule. I can get out, move my body. I like the idea of a challenge and putting that out there. The whole idea of committing to something. I like setting up something that is almost too easy to fail. So you can be successful at it, you're engaged in it. And then also, it's interesting that the times that we're in right now, connectedness looks different. The whole idea of, social distancing. So we're challenged to find connection in very different ways. I know you have a particular emphasis on communication and a particular focus on what communication should look like in these times of stress and change.
And let's look at that from the standpoint of leadership. I mean, I've run companies, some of the people here are running companies, but actually leadership is a process of influencing others. So if you're trying to get your 2-year-old to eat broccoli, you are attempting leadership behavior. So it's a process of influence. So if you look at that in today's, and let me back up, every leader has a style. You have a style, I have a style. Where'd you get it from? You got it from your values, your upbringing, classes you've taken. You've got it through the mentors you've had, the examples that you've seen of leaders, good and bad. So you have a style, but in these changing times, there are 3 things that are really important in terms of the communication. One is flexibility. And that is your ability to change your messaging to better meet the needs of the receiver. And I'll talk a little bit about temperament in a minute. The next is empathy. And now that's not feeling as another feels, because if you're a high logic person, that's a very hard thing to do. It's basically, my wife's been telling me that for like 35 years. So it is basically understanding how someone else would feel and then demonstrating that understanding. And the last thing I think is really important, and that's trustworthiness. And trustworthiness, all of these have to do with communication. So flexibility in your communication style, the delivery of empathy. And what's interesting about trustworthiness is that, as we speak, as 2 people speak, there's always 3 conversations going on. There's, on the surface, me, you, and there's me, and you. And so what happens is the best leaders in changing times open the kimono a little bit. They allow people to know a little bit more of their inner feelings and their inner concerns and their inner doubts. So I think it's perfectly okay in this point in time to open the kimono a little bit more, share some vulnerabilities. You will be perceived as much more honest and much more open, and that goes a long way in times of stress and change.
That's great. So this whole idea of communication looks very different now versus it would at other times. But what you're saying, Mark, these things should apply almost any time. as being the best leader that you can be.
Yes, but in heightened times,
Uh,
there's a difference. People go from wanna to have to. So if you're a leader and you want to have your department under control, but in times of stress and change, if you have to move to I have to, if you want to be loved, that's okay. If you have to be loved, that's something else. So what happens is that stress also exacerbates the personal energies, the negative side of personal energy. Let me give you an example.
right.
I talk in my book, Transforming Stress into Power, about 4 temperaments. There's grounding, creative, logic, and relationship energy. We have preferences. We're dealt a hand of cards. You know that if you've got 2 kids, you look at one and you say, wow, one of these 2 kids drives me crazy, harder to communicate with. I have to communicate them in very different ways. So you know that their temperaments have been formed and they're very different. So what happens is that very grounded people who love predictability and order and change, they go, in terms of change, they hate change, excuse me. They go, I want to go to the same place and do the same thing. And they like that concrete. Creative people who by nature are out in the future and have lots of ideas can get scattered, can get even more scattered now. High relationship people in times of stress and change, they really miss the interact. They miss the people. They miss the energy. They miss the hugs. They miss the handshakes. And very logic people who are primarily logically driven, they basically are struggling to make sense of this. So those are some of the dynamics, and those get exacerbated under stress. So for example, we will often see people who are very highly creative and very highly relationship driven, awfulizing at night. They'll just lay awake. They can't shut their brains off as they create these worst case scenarios in their mind. So that's what gets exacerbated. Normally, under normal conditions, most of us have that pretty well under control. Change is hard for folks.
That's excellent. Do you, I'm just trying to think how you support people in coming through that understanding. So you're recognizing the temperaments, you're recognizing the messaging,
Good.
but people have a challenge just with the change themselves. So how do you support them in having a context for understanding change?
Yeah. So remember, let's go back to this flexibility concept and empathy. And the ability to be flexible means you speak in a language that other people understand. So if the only language that I were to speak is Russian, and if you wanted to communicate with me, it would behoove you to learn some words in Russian, just so we could have a little bit of a camaraderie there. So in terms of being flexible, you start giving people more of what they need. People who are highly grounded, who like to do one thing at a time, very predictable, very tangible, they like to finish things. You don't overwhelm them at this point in time. You say things like, Jane, thank you for being here every day. Today, there's just one thing that we need to get done. That's the #1 priority. One thing to get to. Oh, you're such a good boss. I love you. There's just one thing to get done. If you're a highly creative person, how would I communicate with them? First of all, during stress and change, I would always take a high creative person and go out for a walk. And I would talk to them while they're putting one foot in front of the other and grounding themselves. And then we look at how the new possibilities that they can see might fit into the new reality. Relationship energy people, first thing you do is you uncross. You make eye contact. You lean in a little bit. You mirror the body language, okay? And you soften your voice and you listen. And it takes you longer to deal with high relationship people. High logic people, you can go on the whiteboard and you can chart things out and you can write a formula and you do pros and cons and you quantify things. So you flex your style accordingly.
That's great. I'm just thinking we're talking about what you offer as a leader. I'm also thinking about the leaders themselves. I mean, leaders are taking on transformative change at this point in time.
Absolutely.
And I know resilience is kind of a buzzword because it's sought after. How do we become more resilient in the times that we're in? So share, if you will, just in terms of how leaders go about establishing and maintaining some resilience and stamina during this time.
The first point has to do with looking within, understanding who you are, what your personal strengths and weaknesses are. And that's an important place. So, for example, I'll often do a very simple exercise with people. I'll ask people to think about the biggest change they've ever gone through, the biggest challenge they've ever faced in their life. What was it? And what were the attitudes and the behaviors that served you well? In other words, looking back on this, what did you learn when you went through that enormous challenge in your life? Then the next question is, looking back at that challenge that you've gone through, because you're here now, what attitudes and behaviors got in your way? And so if you look at that, then if you look at the down, I always like to hedge my downside first. So I always like to say, okay, what got in my way? Chances are those same thoughts, that same negative dialogue, the same procrastination, the same worrying about things I couldn't change, that's going to come up again. So knowing that, can we short circuit that? It comes back to the commitment question about your goal. So when I'm retired now, I don't see patients anymore, just write and teach. But when I did, I'd have people set their goals and they'd write out a Dr. Tager goal to make me feel good. And I'd say, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, which is 1, Dr. Tager, I'm not really going to do this. I'm just humoring you right now, to 10, it's going to happen. I would ask them to rate their goal. And if they couldn't give me a 9 or a 10, I would have them step it back and make it something that was doable and achievable. So I think that those are some of the insights in terms of the flexibility you want as a leader. And the other thing that everyone has to do is you've got to get in control of your nervous system. I know you've done a lot of stuff on mindfulness, be here now, control. You've got to monitor and control the workings of your autonomic nervous system. Recognize that you are in fact in control of your reactions, that no one else is giving you high blood pressure. Nothing else is turning on your stomach acidity. Nothing else is making your shoulders go up to your ears and giving you that tight neck. So you have control over that. And that's really what we see with yoga, meditation, Tai Chi, all of those disciplines is the ability to regain control of the workings of the autonomic nervous system.
And that's, it's timely because we're seeing more and more meditation, mindfulness, breathing exercises, the different disciplines Absolutely. That you're talking about, because we're needing that as a society. We're challenged with, as you said, dealing with our feelings and anxieties and all these different things that are free floating. And so we need to attend to how to support ourselves. I know, Mark, you speak to when there's change as a leader, you want to clarify what that new context is so that you can help bring your team along. Share more, if you will.
Yeah, I think that context is really important. And I think that is what is muddy right now. If you knew, in fact, what the future is going to hold, that would clarify the context immediately. But it's sort of like, a broken bone versus MS. And I sympathize for both. But if you have a simple green stick fracture, and I say 99.9% of the time this fracture heals, you'll have no problem. Everybody knows what that context is. If I say you have a disease, it's going to come, it's going to go, we don't know how bad it's going to be. That context of uncertainty is what is so hard. So the antidote for that is to be in the moment and appreciate the moment and control oneself in the moment. But context becomes so much harder. This is where the dialogue becomes critical. to admit your own uncertainties and the fact that, hey, guys, you know, I want you to know, I spent a few sleepless nights thinking about this. See, that goes a long way towards validating the feelings that they have.
Exactly, because they're experiencing that as well.
Sure.
I know you talk about, so we're in this unknown context, but you also speak to that we need to set a direction. We need to.
Yeah, it's exactly. You know, it's sort of like the difference between the pilot and going out to Oregon in a covered wagon. So the way an airplane works, we all get on the plane goes from here to, let's say, Portland, Oregon. And there's not a lot of feedback. I mean, the pilot has feedback, but the passengers, there's no real feedback for them. But what happens is if you set a course, and the course is, I'm going out west to strike it rich, okay?
Sure.
Then you've got enormous flexibility, and what you have to have within that, you're like the Lewis and Clark party. You send out a scout. Scout says, you know what? There's some hostiles over there. Don't go there. Let's go the other way. There's fresh water over here. So what happens is you want to get a lot of feedback from your scouts. And this has to do with the concept of the pyramid. You know, a lot of organizations think of themselves as a hierarchy. And, you know, I've been a CEO, so am I at the top of the hierarchy? Absolutely not. I always thought I was at the bottom of the hierarchy. I can't remember, a triangle here. Yeah, it looks like a heart. Anyway, so the goal of a leader is to support the folks at the base. So you turn that triangle upside down. That's sort of how that works. And I think that scouts are important. You know, people closest to the problem, people closest to the customer, people closest to the data, they have the best content, the best perspective on how to solve a problem. And if you just listen to them and listen more and ask and solicit that kind of feedback. Now we do it, I've always taught a different kind of brainstorming. Most brainstorming, it's done very poorly. We grab you from your office, say, hurry up, rush in the conference room, we're gonna brainstorm. And we give them some sugary sweets and load them up with coffee and say, hurry up and think about great new ideas. Now, the way the brain works is you're still processing all the other stuff from the morning. You are not free to come up with your best ideas. So if you think about it, where do you get your great ideas? If I would ask you, John, where are you when you got a great idea that seemed like it was coming to you from out of the blue? Well, you're in 4 places.
I like the direction you're rolling in.
You're going, here, there's 4 places you are.
Yeah, great.
It's a second. 4 places. You're either exercising.
Yep.
You are in the bathroom, showering, shaving, you know, just getting ready. You are just waking up from sleep.
Great.
Or you are driving to and from work. Now, I've asked this question, by the way, to thousands and thousands of people. Only once, I was at the University of Texas Health Sciences Center, and I asked people to stand up and sit down when I get it. This one gal, she's still standing, and I said, well, where you get your good ideas from? She said, work. Never happened. So what happens is the brain needs that time to sort of synthesize. So I always advocate a 3-part process. What you do is you bring everybody together and you just data dump. You put up everything that you possibly know, everybody, let's just data dump. No pressure to come up with a new idea. Then what I usually do is I give people like a little thing, a rabbit's foot, a straw, I know, it's just some sort of tangible thing. So just take this home and just put this someplace where a little picture of something where you can it will remind you. And then what happens, you let their subconscious kind of digest it and come up when they're in the shower and they're driving to work or they're exercising. I get all my good ideas on the exercise cycle, and that's where they come. Yep. And then you bring them back and reassemble, and then you tease out those great ideas, and then you can sort and test them. You'll get a much better process that way.
I love it because you can't structure creativity. So I like the 3-step model. What was the intention of that token that they take? Is that
Well, just a little something, just, you know, I mean, you look at it and it just kind of tweaks you a little bit, you know, it just sort of makes it tangible for the highly creative people. Oh yeah, I see that. I get that a little, right.
I like that. So tell me about balance. How do we keep balance in mind with
Well,
staff? And
you know, I've gone back and forth on this one quite a bit. Some days I think it's possible to be balanced. It's maybe balanced in a lifetime. But then I also think that maybe balance isn't even possible at all. Maybe what it really is periods of intense focus that work, life, other kinds of things that over time maybe even out. But in a given day, week, month, I don't know that it's really possible. I know that, you know, on the whole, I would say my life is fairly balanced, but there are times when, you know, I'm doing a project and, you know, everything, all my energy goes in that direction. So for that day, that week, I am unbalanced. But if you look at it in a longer sense, then it kind of evens out.
Yeah, and I can understand there's those times that call for being all in.
Yes.
And then you find ways to have other.
Yeah, exactly.
Mark, you're a wealth of knowledge and expertise. I really appreciate you data dumping with us.
Don, pleasure. That's the data dump for the day. And you know, if there's any way that these words help people, that'd be great.
If I was to ask you, where you brought through a lot of different lists and items that I know people would want to know. You talk about flexibility, temperament, empathy. Yeah. You talk about control, challenge, commitment, connectedness. Where do we find more information?
Yeah, you know, this is interesting because this book is the book I think we're talking about.
Yes.
This book is absolutely as current today in every single word as it was in 2002 when I wrote it with Harry Woodward. So, you know, it's not easy to find, but if folks are interested, they could drop me a note at team, T-E-A-M, at changeworld.com, and I can hook them up with that. Then I think I gave you another book. I would get up and get it now, but I've got like really funny shorts on. There's another book I have called Transforming Stress into Power. This is my uniform. It's shorts down here, and first time I buttoned something in a few days here. But I've got another book called Transforming Stress into Power, and those are the two books that relate to this particular talk. I do a lot for healthcare professionals. A lot of my work is aimed in that direction.
Excellent. So we can go to the website and
or you can just drop me a note, team@changeworld.com, and you know I can arrange to get you a copy. I've got some floating around.
Mark, thank you so much. Any gifts in closing? Any last words that you'd want to offer?
You know, there's a quote that I often end talks with, that one should make the best use of one's power and take the rest as it comes. Do not pray for easy lives. Pray to be a stronger person. Do not pray for powers equal to your tasks, but do not pray for powers equal to your tasks, but pray for a stronger person. Then the doing of your tasks shall be no miracle, but you shall be the miracle. So this concept of getting stronger, building resilience. What is resilience? It is really the capacity to have greater amounts of energy and focus to be able to apply to life's challenges. So I often think of becoming a more powerful person. Pray for powers equal to your tasks. You know, so that if the task is large, don't pray for an easy task. Pray for powers equal to that task. That's sort of my sense about that. And that's what I would leave folks with, and hope this has been helpful for people.
That's fantastic. I tell you, I gained a lot from sitting across from you, and really appreciate your teaching.
My pleasure.
And Mark, thank you. All of you, thanks for joining us, and until next time, be well.
Okay,
thank you very much.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.